response to sexual violence in our community. To date, by virtue of the hard work of all of our partners, both here at the City of Missoula, Missoula County, the County Attorney's Office, advocates and community members, we are far down the path of compliance with our agreement with the Department of Justice, and I'm very proud of the work that all of you have done to get us there. In particular, I want to acknowledge the hard work of Captain Mike Collier, who has from the beginning been nothing but diligent in meeting both the letter and the spirit of our agreement, and frankly, because of the work that he and others have done, I think we're exceeding the expectations of that agreement, and I think the community is better for it. We are making, as I say, tremendous progress, and today we begin yet another part of that progress in providing an opportunity for the larger community to become actively involved in understanding how we manage sexual violence in our community, and the community can provide us with additional oversight as we continue to serve the women and men of the community we are sworn to take care of. We have a terrific group of volunteers who have been helping us along the way. One of those this morning is no stranger to the City of Missoula, Missoula County, the state of Montana, and destinations far and wide, the world, as she suggests to me. Many of you know Janet Donahue, if not in person, by reputation. She is a person who gets things done, and her role in administering this community audit will be sort of keenly suited to her many talents. We trust Janet to get this job done, along with lots of other folks. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Janet Donahue.
Thank you, Mayor. The police department has been and continues to be committed to make sure that the service provided to sexual assault victims is coordinated from the beginning of the report of an assault until the conclusion of the case. This process, which is developed by Praxis International, a nonprofit organization in St. Paul, Minnesota, will be used to help them further this process. We will bring together agencies and individuals within those agencies as a team to look at the entire process holistically and make sure that there are no gaps from the beginning to the end. We're very excited to include in that process and have agreement with the University of Montana, the County Attorney's Office, victims advocate agencies, and others, and we will include others as we move along in the next week or so to participate in this. It will not be a short process. It will be about a 6-month process or a little longer. We hope to have conclusion to this process by mid-December with a report and recommendations back to each agency. We know that all of the workers in this process have policies, philosophies, forms, and day-to-day work operations that affect the result of how we coordinate sexual assault cases. And so that's why it's going to take a while for us to get through this process. And I know that everyone is eager to get to the point where there are no gaps and that victims are treated fairly and offenders are held accountable. So I guess, Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I can give you an overview of how this is going to look in general terms. We're going to assemble a multidisciplinary team to help us conduct the audit. So it'll be members of organizations that are involved in the criminal justice system, working collaboratively as a team to do a number of activities while auditing other pieces of the system. Those activities I can describe in a little more detail later if you'd like, but it's about reading what people do, watching people do, understanding their training and their culture about how they immerse themselves in this type of work, and then bringing that back to the group to identify if there's any gaps in safety for victims and offender accountability.
So I think at this point we'll open it up to comments and questions, concerns that you might have with what we've outlined so far, and we're certainly welcome to any suggestions that you might have to help us along the way. And I think those chairs are pointed, they used to be pointed this way when I was here. Anybody want to have any comment? Yes.
And I'll let either Janet or Mike answer that question for purposes of this meeting, because we're on MCAT currently. If you have questions or comments, I'll ask you to come to the microphone and identify yourself. That speaker was Chantel Gaynor. Her question was, she sees a number of familiar faces in this room. And if I recall, Chantel, it was how are we going to reach out to ensure that it's not just the usual suspects spending time here?
So victim participation can come directly in this audit in the form of a focus group. Remember, this is a model that has a lot of flexibility. So as we flesh out which parts we want to use and which parts we don't, we'll put those into play. But I expect a focus group for victims will be a part of this. The other way victims are going to be engaged is a little bit outside of our topic today on the audit, but we are working to establish a specific victim survey. So this audit, if you will, is a little bit more focused on the systems and the positions within this system. The standalone victim survey will be focused on the victim's involvement with the system.
Involvement in the system and their experiences from the past. It will be a critical part to involve as many victims as we can that are willing to participate in an anonymous manner. So that's one component that is so important to this process. Other questions? No other questions. Okay. I would just say that while there are a lot of familiar faces in the room, this may be one of the few times that we're going to try to gather everybody from top to bottom in this process, this specific process. I know we've all been involved in other efforts in the past and do work together on a day-to-day basis, but we're going to be looking at forms and policies and, as I said earlier, the day-to-day operation and how agencies actually coordinate when a sexual assault is reported. That could include the hospitals, that could include 911. Some of these agencies we haven't talked to yet, but we will to gain their acceptance and participating in this effort. It's important.
Janet, I might ask you to describe, you and Mike had been back to Minnesota for some training. I might ask you to describe sort of what you learned there and what you bring back from that.
Mike and I attended a training session toward the end of April in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Praxis International again. This is an agency, it's a nonprofit agency that works to eliminate abuse and violence for women and their children. So they're focused on two issues, but primarily violence with women. And so the training that we attended took us through a process of using interviews, top-level interviews, day-to-day interviews with workers who have direct contact with victims, 911 centers and going out and reviewing and sitting side by side with a 911 operator that might take a call of that nature. Listening to tapes, interviewing with focus groups victims. In the case that we had, we were allowed to sit in on a focus group with domestic violence victims. Ride-alongs with police, although, you know, again, that was focused more on domestic violence, sexual assaults. That may not be a component here because it's not exactly the same kind of a situation where you might pick somebody up for something like that in a ride-along. Then we also had interviews with police detectives that deal with those kinds of issues. We reviewed hospital forms where intake was immediate upon a victim arrival and the process that they go through and the forms that they use. So it was pretty much the gamut. It also helped us flesh out where there might be gaps in the process. We would look at 911 calls, for instance. We'd look at police reports and determine where there might be a gap in getting a victim to the right service in a timely manner. How a 911 call might be handled in relationship to receiving the initial response, and who's sent, and how that's coordinated with victims advocacy offices, et cetera. So, and we have a ton of material, and hopefully we may be able to use their services as well next month in a training. So we're going to put the team together, and then we're going to train them in this process, so they're not just thrown out. They'll get the same kind of training we did. Well, we haven't determined that yet. There will be at least one from each agency, though, that we identify. Other questions?
Emily Adamson from KECI-TV. You mentioned that you traveled to go do some of this training, and that I can't remember, Praxis, is that what it's called?
Praxis, it's Praxis.
So are they helping facilitate like the actual, how this audit will work? And if so, have they done a similar thing in other communities, and what was the outcome of that?
They've done several of these kinds of audits in other communities. The model that we've been advised to use specifically is Duluth, Minnesota. And we're working with them right now, and all of their resources are available to us throughout this process. They've dedicated themselves to making sure that our effort is successful. And in a number of the cases that they've handled, they did some in Lincoln, Nebraska as well, and that one was particularly sexual assault related. And in each instance, they've come out with great guidelines and recommendations to ensure that the gaps are closed. And those reports are also available at their website, and Mike and I both have several of those if you'd like to see them. Could you come?
Microphone, please.
Sorry, I'm out of practice too with this microphone thing.
Bryn Merkley, KPAX TV. How much is this all going to cost roughly?
We didn't think we needed to budget anything specific for the audit. The reason being is Janet has agreed to volunteer to do it, which is a huge cost savings. A lot of agencies hire consultants to do what Janet's going to do for us, so we appreciate her doing that. It's going to be my time. It's going to be the time of the other Missoula Police Department representative who's on the team. And then the organizations that we asked to participate are going to be volunteering too, and I'm assuming representing their department, they'll be getting paid their wage to do it. There's going to be some printing costs and that type of thing, putting it together at the end, but it's not really a big money thing. It's a time commitment. What I'm talking to Praxis about is their ability to support it with costs from the Office of Violence Against Women. So we're hoping to get an answer back from them on that later. We know that they'll support us in a couple of ways, for sure, without any additional funding needs. But if they can get other funding from OVW to pay for their consultants, they could help us not only in training the new team, but in the audit as it goes along. So dollars and cents wise to the City of Missoula, it's going to be negligible.
And for those of you who may not know, Janet's uniquely qualified in as much as she served as a Justice of the Peace. She served as a Missoula County Commissioner, and her last full-time professional assignment was Chief Administrative Officer of the City of Missoula, so she has plenty of experience with public process and solving complex problems cooperatively and collaboratively.
Emily Foster, ABC Fox. I know one of the goals is to kind of increase community engagement in this whole goal, and I was just curious, are there going to be any options or opportunities for more public engagement, perhaps some forums, anything like that?
Janet?
Well, the community participation in an effort like this is kind of small because the community doesn't have the knowledge and the expertise that all of these agencies do, but their participation will come directly through the sexual assault victims that choose to participate in the forums. And there will be obviously a report and recommendations that come out. Anything we write, of course, is public information, so hopefully as we move through this, we can give updates and that sort of thing to the public.
And as we, as we march down the path toward compliance, one of the things that I'd like us to do is to present to the community in a town hall meeting sort of our progress. To date, we're just tipping over into second year of our agreement, becoming more compliant at every pass, and we'd like the community to be aware of that and provide any feedback it might be interested as well.
What kind of feedback or progress do you have to report to the Department of Justice? And do you send them the final report and they review it? How does that part of it work?
So the Department of Justice, so we have an independent monitor we've been working with since we entered into this agreement, and his responsibility is to pay attention to nearly every detail of what we're up to, and to report to the Department of Justice, but also to keep us apprised of our progress. That independent monitor will continue to pay attention to this component of the larger agreement, and will report to DOJ and frankly back to us with regard to how well we're, again, following the letter and spirit of the agreement. Peter, would you turn the microphone on? Which seems odd to ask you for some reason.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Peter Christian, KGVO Radio. You had mentioned we have a compliance officer. Could you identify him and identify if he's in the room today?
He is not. His name is Tom Tremblay,
Okay.
and he, pardon me, he was hired just about a year ago now and has been working with us since. Retired law enforcement officer. I'm trying to remember where home is for him, Mike. I'm sorry? Burlington, Vermont.
Okay, he's a long way from home.
It's a long way from home.
Will there come a time when all this is done, after the agreement, it's a 3-year agreement, is that correct?
2.
2-year agreement. Will there come a time when the Department of Justice signs off and says Missoula, Montana is A-OK?
Yeah, so this is a function of that. This is a function of that compliance. And in effect, the independent monitor will work with us, and all parties will acknowledge that we are compliant with the agreement, and we fully expect to be in that position by the end of the term of the agreement. Frankly, the way these folks are working, I'd be surprised if we weren't done before. And Mike will talk to me later about never saying anything like that again.
Other questions, comments?
Well, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it and look forward to the process continuing and folks getting taken care of.